Hello, everyone. So glad to see you today. I am so excited about this program, as Renee knows. Welcome to IA&A Hillyer. My name is Tim Brown, the Hillyer Director, and today, obviously, we have a program that's a conversation with Renée Stout and Camille Brown. Renée Stout is the curator of this current exhibition, The Oracle Said, Be Still. She's also probably one of the most important American artists in America today. We can go on and on about Renée. Camille Brown is the assistant curator at the Phillips Collection. I believe you're also the lead curator for the current African Modernism exhibition. Organizing curator. So we're in for a treat. Join me in welcoming our guests, Renée Stout, Camille Brown.
Thank you for that introduction, Tim, and thank you all for joining us. I thought we could jump right in. And my first question is, I wanted to talk a little bit about the title of the exhibition. The Oracle Said, Be Still. Who is the Oracle?
You know, the Oracle is this nebulous being that to me is like probably observing all of us, and maybe the Oracle is like the universe in general. You know, and I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person, but maybe this being that is just watching all of our antics and you know, the mess we put ourselves through. So when COVID came about and we were, you know, stuck in the house, George Hemphill, because everything was so disconnected and people couldn't go out and see art and things like that, George Hemphill decided to create, like, his artist, he wanted us to do a set of prints that were affordable, small edition, you know, that kept art going during the pandemic, right? And so because we're in the middle of that, I did this piece called The Oracle Said, Be Still. And it was addressing the idea that we couldn't go out, we couldn't do anything. And what did this stillness mean? Why were we going through this? And I'm one of those people that believes that, you know, something could be uncomfortable, but when you really examine it, what can you get out of it? What can you turn it into? And I saw it as a kind of reset for people to have to be still. They were forced to, because some people want to run from themselves, you know, so they distract themselves with all kinds of things. And then there are people like me who are introverts. I can sit still. I got to live with me, right? So it was funny to have to see, you know, watch people who could do it and people who couldn't do it. And so The Oracle Said, Be Still was about something occurring in the universe to make people have to be still. And so I did this disembodied head that represented the Oracle, and it had a speech bubble, and inside the speech bubble it said, be still. Yeah.
It's interesting that the title of this exhibition is drawn from a title of your own work. How does your artistic practice influence your curatorial practice?
It's interesting because I'm drawn to artists who are doing the things that I wish I could do. In some strange way, because I was trained as a painter and a realist painter at that. And it's interesting because, just to say this off the top, this exhibition is multi-layered in ways that people wouldn't even believe, because all this is going on inside my head. And I'm not sure that the viewer will know all of that, but it makes sense to me. So that the artists that I chose, I relate to them in different ways on different levels. And for example, it's like, we'll take Trevor. Okay, so Trevor's a realist painter. Whenever, and like I had never seen his work, the actual work, before I did a studio visit for this show.
Okay.
I had seen it online because we're Facebook friends. So he would post his work and I would look at it, and I loved it because whenever I would see Trevor's work, it instantly took me back to that 10-year-old girl in 4th grade elementary school who was looking at a 4th grade art history book and encountered Edward Hopper's Nighthawks.
Yeah.
And something about the feeling that Nighthawks gave me as that child, whenever I see Trevor's work, it feels that way. There's this sense of alienation, of loneliness. But I'm reading into his work because I don't know what he intends, but that's my initial reaction to his work. And it's that quiet solitude that feels like Edward Hopper's work that made me drawn to Trevor's work and wanted to put it in this show. So that's how, you know, my experience influenced. That's one level.
Absolutely. And can you speak a little bit about the research process? You talked about how you came to Trevor's work. How did you come to select all the artists included? Was that through like personal connections? Had you seen their artwork before?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
And I think that like an artist like Cianne, whose work I've followed since she was in the Six in the Mix show that I did around, Tim, I always forget when I did Six in the Mix, but it was like
2009.
2009? That was 2009? Yeah. So that's when I first met Cianne and encountered her work, and I've watched it evolve over that time. So she's like an artist that had already, I had been looking at her work and watching it evolve. But the other artists, I've come to meet them in different kinds of ways. And I'm always looking at their work whenever I see it and pondering it and thinking about it, and I keep coming back to it. So when I was, asked to do a show like this, I gravitated towards their work, and they also happen to be artists that don't necessarily show a lot in DC. And I want to see them show more in DC because of what their work does for me, and so it's just like, well, it does this for me, but it can do this for the viewers as well. So to have a chance to have their works come together in Hillyer Art Space was a way to showcase artists that I'm always looking at.
Absolutely. Something that was interesting to me when I went through the exhibition, I started to see these different through lines, and one of them was ecology, and I'm thinking of Joyce Wellman's Undersea Mammal and Untitled Sky, as well as Ellyn Weiss's Form Unidentified Specimen 21. How do you see the relationship between nature and stillness?
Oh, definitely, nature and stillness. And it's like, that's why I chose those pieces. And I'm so glad as a curator that those things resonated with you, and you went right to why those people that you just named are in this show. Because one of the levels in this show, I'm just looking at, as an artist and a human being living in the times we're in, how crazy it's getting, how we're destroying the planet we live on, how we're destroying each other. And the idea that nature doesn't have a choice in this. We decide to destroy things and take it along with us. And the idea that these artists are focusing on nature and making us look at it was why they're in this show, because that's one level of meaning in the show. Nature and what are we doing, and me asking the viewer to ponder nature. So like an artist like Joyce, she might be a little upset that I didn't pick her most recent work, right? But it's like, it speaks to the time we're in now. I don't care when she did it. It's speaking, it's speaking to the time that we're in now. And so when I went into this show, I didn't see it as like a commercial gallery where they always want your latest product. Oh, what's your most recent work? I wasn't looking at it like that. It was like, I approached this space like a museum space, and I had an idea for a show, and I chose the work that created the environment. So, with Joyce's piece, with Alan's work, so yeah.
I loved the curator statement, which is right back there. I'm going to kind of paraphrase a bit, so bear with me. In your curator statement, you wrote about wanting to offer the viewer a space to quiet their minds and reflect on simple, joyful moments, as well as the fragility of nature, the fragility of democracy, the fragility of life itself. One thing that I really liked is how you juxtaposed joy and sadness throughout this exhibition. And for me, this is reflected in this these portraits of Beatrice Ferguson by Sharon Farmer, hula hooping, as well as in the back gallery, there is that photograph of Medgar Evers. He was a civil rights activist, his tombstone. You could have easily just focused on joy. What made you want to weave in melancholy through this exhibition?
Oh, that's so funny that you picked up on that, because Thursday night, the artists were doing their talk. I didn't want to talk at all, but then somebody asked a question about how this exhibition came about, and one of the things that I said was that Sharon Farmer's two pieces bookended everything that I've been thinking about and all the layers of this show. They were the perfect bookends, and it's funny how they happen to be the only literally figurative works. And Medgar Evers, as you said, he was only 38 when he was killed, and one of the reasons he was killed was fighting for voting rights, and it's an issue we're dealing with right now. But at the same time, that's the melancholy of that room back there. But in this one, you have this woman who's seen some of everything, you know, the best and the worst of this culture, this world. But at this stage in her life, she can still find that inner child, you know, and when Tim asked for an image to represent this exhibition, one of the reasons why I picked one of these is because the synchronicity of it, that her dress has all these O's on it. And then the hula hoop forms an O. She is the oracle.
I love that.
You know, she is she's seen it all.
Yes.
You know, and so those are the bookends of this exhibition.
Oh, that's
you
so
know.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And thinking about the Evers photograph, you paired it with Cianne Fragione's like slab sculptures. There was something about that felt very like ancient to me in a way that spoke a little bit to this work, the old Nubian. Do you view a connection between stillness and time? Does stillness feel like more of a contemporary issue to you, or something that's been laced through time?
Laced through time. You know, we always have to take the time to be still. You know, and especially in times like these, I think that we're all bombarded with the noise, and you know, we have our own personal lives, and you know, always seems like something's going on, like the plumbing's not working today. You know, a country's been bombed over here, and it's like we're just bombarded with stuff. And where do we have the time to find the stillness? And I feel like that I'm privileged in that I'm single. And I'm in my studio. You know, I can always take advantage of a kind of stillness. But for people who have children and they have jobs and they have so much going on in their lives, where do they find it? And I'm always wondering how people do that. How are they able to find stillness, you know? And I wrote something in my notes about, you know, finding stillness and why that's so important. If you want me to read it, if I can find it.
Yes, please, I would love that.
I don't know where I put it. I should have marked it. I'll just read this.
Okay.
And it just says, life is fragile, nature is fragile, democracy is fragile. These truths can get buried behind the distractions and noise of daily life. One of the lessons COVID presented, which some people recognized while others did not, is that sometimes the universe needs us to be still so that we can take the time to ponder, become aware, and make valuable connections between events that are happening all around us that affect us all, either directly or indirectly. Sometimes quiet is required to see clearly and listen intently so that the universe can bestow its natural order upon things and restore the balance that it's always seeking to create. The oracle said, be still.
Beautiful. No, that's so beautifully said. And kind of speaking on stillness, it was interesting to me that you included Crossing by Elaine Qiu and Hub by Trevor Young, because to me, Crossing, it's like these overlaid images that give the work a kind of kinetic quality.
Yeah.
And in Hub, it's this really solitary, eerie depiction of an airplane engine, which of course is a form of transportation. So it led me to think, do you view stillness as an act or an emotion or none of the above or all of the
all
above?
of it. Because when I was pondering the idea of stillness, I thought about some of the pieces that I included. They're not necessarily still, but there is stillness within them, you know, because they work on multiple levels. So you can find a stillness, and I would love to read just this one little paragraph about, you know, Elaine wrote about her crossing, you know, and it says, Crossing is a part of an ongoing Innerscape series that explores the intricacies of threshold moments in life. Threshold typically takes the form of ambiguous spaces or moments, the interplay between light and dark, the cusp of dawn and dusk. This series of paintings are all balanced on the brink of coming together and falling apart. I'm interested in these moments because they are electrified with possibilities, embodying the process of transitioning into new reality. So in some ways, her painting, it's like, I met Elaine a few years back when she was a graduate student at the University of Maryland. And I had to do studio visits, and we were talking about her work. And I was struck by the quality of her work being at that crossroads, which I always deal with crossroads in my own work.
Yeah.
Because I always feel like, especially the times we're in now, this country's at a crossroads that seems to be going on and on and on and on, you know, because we're not making decisions that we need to make to move forward. We're stuck in this holding pattern. And to me, Elaine's work, Crossings, kind of says that. It's fragmented, the way the times are right now. And when I looked at it, it felt this kind of sense of loneliness, like during COVID, when maybe like what it reminded me of, downtown there's this mall on G Street. I don't know if it's G or F or whatever. And it's always bustling during lunchtime because all of the office buildings, people go there for lunch. I hadn't been down there in a long time, but I could imagine that once COVID struck, it looked like Elaine's painting, where you see these empty chairs and nobody's coming in there, you know. But when you walk up on Elaine's painting, it's like there were just like marks and, you know, swaths of paint, and it's disintegrating. But when you stand back, a picture sort of starts to emerge. And I like that idea of being in between this kind of nebulous space where it's abstraction, it's reality. And if you notice, all the artists in this show, in some ways, are on the verge of, or on the fence of abstract and realism. And sometimes I made subconscious choices, I think. Yeah.
Well, it seems like you're kind of pointing to, you kept on using the word balance, the need to create stillness within oneself to be able to then generate some sort of energy into moving in one direction or the other. So it seems like there's this constant tethering of two ideas in the way that you approached this exhibition. Something that I was interested in is I feel like it would have been easy to curate an exhibition about stillness, have very muted palettes, have everything feel very quiet. But then I look at a work like Adrienne Gaither's over here that is so colorful and energetic. And in fact, I think every work in this exhibition has a real energy behind it. Can you speak a little bit about what drew you to some of these more like ebullient works?
Because that's the element of joy. Like when I went into Adrienne's studio, it's like she is, all of these artists really, you know, on some level, but she happens to be the youngest one in the show too. And there's this sense of her being at play when I walked into that studio that I recognized in myself. I play in my studio. I feel like I'm 5 years old in every age I've ever been when I'm in that studio, right? And I walked in there and she's just like in the middle of all of her artwork and she's showing me stuff. And titles were important to me in this too. And it's like coming through to me said, no matter what's going on, I'm going to burst through all of the noise, all of the crazy, and I'm going to find joy. And that's why that piece is here, because that's what it feels like to me.
How did you see these two pieces? And I believe this is a slab piece by Cianne. How did you see these two pieces in relation?
Youth. Because, you know, you think back to, like when I saw that piece in Cianne's studio, and it looked like a car to me, you know. She claims I named the piece. I don't remember, but I guess I did. I said, that looks like a car. Lover's Joyride, right? And I remember having this red Corvair, you know, and having boyfriends and friends from school in it. And to me, that relationship between that painting and that car, it's like youthful joy and, you know, the world being full of possibilities. And it's hard when you get older and you feel like, you know, you want to have that. You still want to feel that. You don't want youth to be just, you know, the people who are young just feeling like there are possibilities. You want to get old and still feel like there are possibilities. So I like the idea of those two pieces being together, coming through, and then this, you know, Lover's Joyride. It's just like this, those two to me spoke to each other.
And so I'm also curious about the actual exhibition design. I see there's a work that's elevated up here. And Trevor Young's, there's a separate piece that's also elevated. Is that coming from the artist or is that you?
It's me. And I'm glad they weren't mad at me and they indulged me. But I felt like, okay, we'll talk about Cianne's first. Yes. It's like it's so tiny that, and that blue was so intense. it felt like this unattainable thing. Like, I can't even describe some of the reasons why I did what I did, but I felt like it should have been up there because I felt like if it was on a pedestal, it's just one more little thing on a pedestal. But up there, it takes it to another level and makes you ponder it in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
And that blue is one of my favorite colors in life, okay? I see it on a lot of African art. If you look at African art, there's this blue, this cobalt blue that you find as a little detail in crevices on some African art. So I've always been drawn to that blue. And the fact that she focused on that blue, and the piece is called Finding Blue, you know? So to me, this exhibition is not just about the concepts behind the work, but as these artists, you know, dealing with color, mark making, you know, the basic things about being artists.
Yeah.
You know, which the art world doesn't really deal with that a lot. What I'm getting sort of frustrated with is the art world focusing on spectacle and getting so far away of why artists do what they do. But then that's what happens when the art world takes over and the horse has been put before the cart and the art world is dictating what art is and it's no longer artists doing it.
Do you feel like you were thinking about the artist's actual practice as you were selecting their work, or were you going more on the actual art object?
Both.
Okay.
Because especially visiting their studio, it's like it was fun for me to be there with them.
Did you visit every studio?
I visited everybody's studio. Ellyn was away for the summer.
Okay.
I went to everybody's studio. And it was fun to be in their environment where they create and talk to them. And as an artist, you know, I was the curator, but as an artist to artist, that's where the real joy came in. Because for me, I don't know about them, but for me, it was like, okay, this is playtime. We're in it. You know what I mean? Like, we're in the sandbox right now, right? And so talking to them about what they're doing and that kind of thing was the real joy for me. So it was part of the process of selecting the work, because I had looked at their work online and I'd gone in their studios and I had notes and I had written several artists' works, you know, several works from each of them. And then I whittled it down to the things that I felt were really the things that I felt created the essence of what I was trying to do.
And I do want to make sure we have time for questions.
Okay.
So I only have 2 more.
Okay.
The first is, how do you conjure stillness in your own life?
I don't know. I don't know how I did it. I think I did it through them. I don't know if I can. I'm a ranter, and everybody who knows me know that I rant on Facebook. They know that, right? I rant in my artwork. So I think that doing this exhibition has probably made me want to quiet myself down and get back to, you know, the interior. And to be quiet again, you know, because this world makes me want to scream, you know, and I don't always want to be screaming. You know, I want to get back to some quiet too. So I think doing this was kind of therapeutic, you know, because I wanted to do, initially when, you know, I was approached about curating a show for this, I was going to do a political show and make everybody rant. We're all ranting, right? We had this one collective rant. And I'm like, but that's contributing to the noise. You know, I want something where the viewer walks in and feels the same way they do when they go into the Rothko room at the Phillips. You know, where you sit on that space in the middle and you just contemplate the work. So I wanted it to feel like that, and that's why the lighting is the way it is. But also, I still wanted that underlying thing where it's addressing things that are currently happening. You know, like you know, Sharon's, you know, Medgar Evers' piece, and like a piece like Trevor's, you don't know what it is. It's like, you know, is it a plane bombing something? Is it, you know, a red-eye flight from California to New York? It's just this thing. And Trevor talked the other day about being inspired by Anish Kapoor's piece down at the Hirshhorn, the beautiful cobalt blue, deep blue piece where you almost fall into it because the space is so weird. And you know, that's how that piece felt to me when I walked in his studio. I went straight to it because it's so mysterious. It's a space. It was quiet, it was mysterious, and I felt like it worked for the show. Back to what you were saying about why they were high. because I wanted that orientation of that plane that you would think of something in the sky. And that's
and
why.
there's also a house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And he said something the other night about encountering that structure, driving at night. Where were you driving?
Route 1 in Laurel.
See, and that's the way I felt when I saw it. It's like when you drive at night and you're on the road and you encounter this building and you're looking at it and it might be closed, but like, what is that? And that's why I put it up high. I wanted you to feel like, the viewer to feel like they're seeing something off in the distance. And I felt like if it was at eye level, you wouldn't kind of feel as much that way, but having it like that, it makes you have to focus in that way and takes you out of the way you would normally process that piece. I don't know if it was successful, but it's what I tried.
I think it was. And also, because I can't help myself, what are you currently working on?
Well, I'm bad. It's like, unlike these artists, I don't consider myself prolific. And I feel like I do a lot of goofing off and playing, doing anything but doing my artwork, right? But then all of a sudden, when I know I have a looming deadline, something happens and I switch into high gear and all this work comes out. But I realize it's my pattern. It's always been my pattern because I need to absorb a lot and play a lot, and that's what feeds the work. And then I get on a roll. And I have this installation I have to do at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York, and it's a show about, it's called Finding Home. And it's about, my piece is going to be about the idea of everybody needing a space to simply be. So in some ways, working on this show, that quiet, you know, it's like even a homeless person should, you know, I don't understand homelessness. I can't wrap my brain around why a country this wealthy would even have homelessness, but that's another tangent. But everybody needs a space to just simply close their door and just go and be. So that's what my space is going to be about. Yeah.
I'm excited to see it. And so I don't know if anybody has questions. I have many more, so I can keep going, but I also want to make sure we have time.
Okay, for those of you who have questions, we actually have a microphone for you to hold, so we can capture the conversation. It's right back there, so raise your hand if you have a question.
Just want to ask Renee when the show
One
is.
second.
Can you tell us when the show is at Cooper Hewitt?
It's going to be October 2024.
Put it on my calendar.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Something that I'd be interested in speaking a little bit more about is what's sitting right behind us. The cobalt, which you've spoken about in reference to many other artworks, is also present here. Can you speak a little bit about this piece and why you wanted to include it?
When I visited Cheryl's studio, like I've seen Cheryl's work, but not firsthand. I've seen it like online. And so when I visited her studio and she started opening up the flat files, and this is the funny thing about a lot of these artists in here, they got these flat files, and people don't ever see what's in their flat files. The place to go is the flat files. Okay, Joyce? Out of the flat files, right? So Cheryl had pulled these pieces out, but they are recent pieces of hers. And she had been experimenting with liquid pulp in a paper workshop. So these are liquid pulp. It's all paper. So it's paper pulp. So she's painting with the pulp. So I really like these pieces. And so I said, yeah, well, I want to use this one, and I want to use this one. But so we were sitting at her dining room table, running our mouths, and I happened to look over. There was this sideboard up against the wall. And it had all these personal items that felt like a altar. So I'm like, you know, you could actually take this right here and put it in the studio, right? So she was like, yeah. But then she said, well, you know, it's so personal. I don't know if I could put, you know, because some things had belonged to her mother. She said, I'm not so sure I want to put my personal stuff. I said, well, you can construct one that, you know. So she ended up collecting objects that went with this piece right here to create kind of this whole tableau. You know, like there's a COVID test right there. I don't know if that's she may have said that may have been a brooch or a piece of jewelry that.
Mother's
remember if it was a cigarette case or some sort of makeup case or something.
Yeah, and she had cast these in a glass workshop. You know, she likes natural things like that. But one of the things she talked about, and one of the things that her work is about, is examining female power, female sexuality, nature, and how all those things go together, and the cycle of life, you know, and everything that has to do with, you know, being female, feminine, that kind of energy in the world. And one of the reasons why I wanted her work in the show is because part of the problem right now is the world's out of balance because masculine energy is taking over everything. Masculine energy should never be in charge by itself. So that's why I felt like I wanted to celebrate feminine, you know, because that's what's going to make the world balanced. Until we recognize what women bring to power, we're going to be out of balance, and the world's going to keep going through what it's going through. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it.
Were you mindful about wanting to include paintings and prints and photography, or was that something that just sort of unfolded as you were curating the exhibition?
You know, I think I naturally just gravitate to using a variety of media instead of saying what has to be a painting show, because in my own work, you know, it's like when you look at the art world, most of the time an artist stays to one medium. Like somebody's a painter, somebody's a sculptor. I don't know when I started doing it, but every show that I've had for the past several years has included painting, drawing, sculpture, you know, everything is in it. Installation. So when I approached this, I felt the same way. There's not a lot of sculpture in it. You know, I didn't want to do too many things. If you notice, the show's very spare. And I like the idea of creating a space that was more like quiet and poetic and contemplative than filling the space with a lot of work that each piece couldn't have a certain amount of space around it. Yeah, so.
When we were speaking earlier, we talked about the sense of melancholy that can be found in some of the works in the bathroom. Do you feel like you separated these two rooms in that way?
Yeah, I did, because I felt like if I didn't do that, then what those works were conveying and what these works were conveying may get a little lost. And to me, in some ways, maybe my idea to do that was corroborated by your saying that. Because if you felt that that was a more melancholy room, that was my objective. And that, you know, because I feel like, not to say that being melancholy is a bad thing. It's contemplative. It's like thinking about the whole of human emotions. And so that's what that room was about. And this room was more like maybe a little bit more, you know, like, and see, I don't want to make the separation between one being better than the other. To me, it's a range of human emotions. And I felt like those emotions were equally important. And like Cianne's piece with the marbles, they weren't necessarily melancholy, but I felt like formally they played off of Sharon's Medgar Evers piece, because they almost could look like tombstones. But where I made the correlation between the two was that it was about fragments and a journey, because they're called journey, you know, she's journeying to the Ionian Sea, which is a place that makes her happy, right? But then Medgar Evers journeyed to a place where he's at peace now. He doesn't have to deal with any of this. But it's kind of sad in a way, you know, so there's this joy and then there's sadness, but the forms speak to both of those states.
To me, the Evers photograph is probably the most explicitly political work within the exhibition. And it's interesting to me that you initially were thinking of an exhibition that was more political, and then you came to stillness. Do you view stillness in some way as a political act?
Oh yeah. Yeah, in a weird kind of way, and I don't even know how to articulate. I think the stillness, back to the statement that I made about stillness, you know, people rant and rave like I do, but then sometimes, you know, when I'm quiet and I'm connecting the dots and pondering and putting it all together, you know, in my ability to think abstractly and, you know, it's like, that's when I strategize, you know, and put things in perspective. so I can move forward, you know, and take some action. So you have to do a little bit of both. You can take the action, but then when do you pull back and assess the situation, you know, and look at what's going on. So that requires a kind of stillness and focus and contemplation. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. I have more. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the sculpture that's right back there in that corner. To me, I saw that work in conversation with Joyce's as far as that kind of environmental, aquatic. Is that something that you were trying to tease out as well?
Definitely. That's why they're next to each other. And I even made a note about that in my curator's book. Now, this is when I'm working on exhibitions and I make the notes, but you know, these are all notes and writings that talking about the process of creating this exhibition. You know, I have some of their works that I thought about. Juxtapositions. Tim sent me the floor plan. You know, it's like their works, the idea of putting these two pieces together, you know, showing I did that just to see what they would look like together. But yeah, so Joyce's undersea mammal and Ellyn's specimen to me were kind of having a dialogue about nature. And I really wanted Ellyn's piece to be lit in a certain way because it's so subtle and tiny. And I wanted the light to draw you in so you can see the subtleties of the piece and the texture of the piece. And I love the way when you get up on the piece and you start to look at the yellow part, it almost has like veins, almost like flesh. And so that's why it had to be lit in a certain way to make you actually look at the piece. You know, but definitely that's why those pieces are together, because I saw the dialogue between the two.
I just have a real quick question for you, Renee. How do you manage to write so neatly? Like everything, when I looked at it, I said, there's no lines. And she's able to, you know, I can't do that. So it's amazing to me.
No, I just love writing and taking notes to the point like, and this has been a lifelong thing. When I was in high school, we'd be like in trigonometry class, which I hated. And so the teacher is speaking and I'm writing notes. It's the joy of actually physically writing on top of it, right? So I'm writing, and then, you know, all my other classmates, they're not paying attention, they're goofing off, they're doing whatever they do. Then test time comes, can we see your notes? You know, so, but I've always liked taking notes, and the joy of actually physically writing, I love too. It's almost like drawing to me. Hello.
I've seen a lot of your rants on Facebook. And your art has always been very strong and powerful. So do you ever think like you would want to go into politics?
Oh my God.
It's always going to be your art that's going to be the...
You know what, I thought about that before because somebody asked me one day, what would you, I don't know what we were talking about. I said, yeah, I'd like to be a politician. I don't know where that came out of. This was way back. I had said it way back before it was crazy. But I had said I wanted to be a politician, but I wouldn't make a good politician because I don't think I'd be as diplomatic as you need to be. Because I'd punch somebody. I just like, no, you're crazy, right? So it's like, no, you're not calm enough to do that, you know. You know what, part of me sometimes wish I could, because I like getting to the point of something. You know, I don't want to just be, you know, beating around the bush. Let's get to the real thing. Let's have a real conversation about what's really going on. And that's the part of me that would want to be a politician, you know. But that's funny you should ask that question.
I have to say that it's funny to me, some of the questions also in the discussion, because this is exactly what I think stillness is. It's all the busyness that's under the surface. And I think that you really hit that on the head. I mean, in order to be still, we have to have a great deal of activity. So it's really interesting to me what you picked. I didn't have a question, I sort of had a comment.
Thank you.
It's this idea of the balance of making all this busyness makes the stillness. It's like, what is the creation? The Oracle said be still, so these artists created stillness out of chaos.
Yeah, and then see, the interesting thing is that it wasn't a show where I came up with an idea and then asked the artist to address it. All the work was already done. I just went to their studios and picked the things that they did.
Well, I'm curious about that actually, because I know that the title is borrowed from a work that you created. Did the idea come from you visiting all these studios and seeing the work, and then you decided to come to Stillness, or was that something that you were already kind of leaning towards?
I think when I started questioning the idea of whether I wanted to do a political show, and I don't know what made me think of the title of that print that I had done, and when it said the Oracle bid said be still, that's when it got me on the idea of stillness. And like maybe I approached the artist with that idea, you know, of the stillness. Yeah, so I think that that's what it was. The Oracle was reminding me that there's stillness, you know, and yeah, it's therapeutic for me to rant on Facebook, but it's also, but there's also a kind of therapeutic quality of choosing work that has some underlying relationship to what's actually going on, but it's not screaming at you. It's a quiet way of doing it, you know. So I went in that direction, and I think the title of that piece reminded me that I could go in that direction.
Do we have any other questions?
Thank you all for coming. Thank you.